We need to discover a place of dynamic potential. And in today's keynote, I will talk about how we, within the geospatial industry, can escape the flatlands to better make sense of our dynamically changing world. I will show you several examples of how we get there, but before we start, I want to explore something I think we can all relate to. What is this? Well, this is music. Well, actually, it's a sheet of music, right? Experienced on a flat surface, experienced on a piece of paper. For most of us, to really experience music means to play it, if you're a musician, or to listen to it, or perhaps in the shower in the morning to sing to it, right? Imagine how dull our world would be if all of our experiences associated with music happened just through that medium or just through that sheet of paper. Now I want you to listen to this. Is this music? Sure it is. Even with just a few notes, something very different and very special happens, right? We have a new experience that goes beyond that sheet of music. And it's amazing how we could transform what's static, that piece of paper, into something that's alive and dynamic. Now I want you to listen to this. Is this music? Well, it's live, right? It makes a sound. But it's not music to me. It's really noise. To many of us, experiencing music means listening to something that makes sense and listening to something that we can relate to. If we now apply this analogy and this story to our industry, I could look at all the data that we have within the industry to make use of in order to extract information and to ultimately make sense of our dynamically changing world. But without form and structure, we can't get to that experience, just like we have with music. Noise is one limited experience, but doesn't fully allow us to appreciate a song as it's meant to be appreciated. But once we give form, something very, very special starts to happen. Music can be wonderful. It could make us smile. If you're a good dancer, I'm not. It could make us dance, and it could ultimately transport us to a new place, a better place. It's a perfect example of how layers, patterns, and time can all come together to form a new dynamic experience. To better understand where we're getting at and where we're trying to go, let's explore how music can escape the flatlands of a sheet of paper and take us to a dynamic place, in a dynamic place of potential that allows us to fully experience that song. It all starts with one single note. By itself, this note makes a noise, and it's okay, it sounds okay. But it's only one small element in a much, much bigger production. Thankfully, music has more than one note. By adding several notes, we start creating layers. And specifically, when you add 3 notes, you create something new, and that's called a chord. So we've moved from an individual note to a chord. And now we can begin to sequence in multiple layers. We could even take this progression a lot further. Our one chord was very nice, but when you start adding a bunch of chords, that's when it starts to get really, really interesting. We can now start to sequence in multiple layers of music over a period of time. And people talk about deep learning and pattern recognition, and we hear all the buzzwords within the AI, artificial intelligence community, and we hear a lot about pattern recognition. But you know what? You know what's very interesting? Our brains, as Ola talked about yesterday with regards to our senses, intuitively identify layers and patterns within a song. How many of you hear the pattern in this next cut? Very interesting. Now, when this starts to happen, you instinctively start to hum or you start to sing along. And that's called a melody. Your experience moves and becomes more rich because you know where the song is, but you also know where it's going, and you want more. And you kind of associate that with predictive analytics with regards to what we do in our space. Now, repeatability, like a refrain, creates patterns. But there are other patterns that can be also identified within music. I want you to now listen to this specific piece and figure out what kind of patterns you can identify. So you start hearing new instruments, right? We could certainly add new instruments to the song to complement the original notes that we started with, thereby adding new layers and also new patterns to make the song a lot more interesting. Now, what we've just done here is create a harmony. So we have melody and we have harmony, the key ingredients to any good song. Similarly, in our space, in our industry, applying analysis or analytics to multiple layers allows us to understand the Earth and all of its associated processes because they're all ultimately connected. So we have layers, we have patterns. What's next? In music, timing is everything. And time, through a sheet of music, is represented by bars, by staffs, and also by signatures, or a signature. So far, the music we've been listening to is in what's called common time, which means 4 beats per measure. But what happens when you start changing the time around with a song, either slow it down or speed it up? Well, we'll find out. We're going to change this next cut to a different timing sequence. We're going to go from 4 beats per measure to 3 beats per measure. And if you like to dance, I don't, but my wife does. She's trying to teach me how to waltz. And if you've danced the waltz, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's what it means to go to 3/4 time. Let's have a look. Now, it's quite dull, isn't it? It's not the same. So when you either slow it down or speed it up, you still have the notes, you still have the layers, but they're not orchestrated at the right time. And the music just isn't right. The experience just isn't right. So where did we start? Let's go to the beginning. We started with a sheet of paper with an idea, reflected through a sheet of paper. We've added some notes. We've added chords. We've layered in different instruments to get to a harmony. And I think we could figure out how to get our timing right. By doing all of this, we can now fully experience the song as it's meant to be experienced. Let's have a listen. Nice song, very nice song. So I'd love to keep talking about music. It's a passion I have. I used to play in a band. I used to be a lead singer in a band. But I do ultimately have to talk about geospatial because that's why you're here. We've quickly arrived at a place that's very rich and gives us a completely new experience. Okay? And just like Ola talked about last night, we are all here to work towards a better version of our world. And that starts also with ourselves. It starts with ourselves, it starts with our work, it starts with our maps, it starts within our cities, and it also builds up to our nations. That's why I think it's very important that we escape the flatlands. We want to go beyond the static experiences that we see with traditional approaches to GIS, mapping, and so forth, and we want to go beyond the flatlands so that we can ultimately deliver dynamic, actionable information that makes sense. And that's what escaping the flatlands is all about. A sheet of music is just one way to experience a song. Okay? Just like a paper or a digital map is a static way to experience the Earth's geography. When we play music and ultimately get our timing right, we can create a beautiful song, as we just saw. Similarly, when applying the same concepts to the geospatial industry, we can now connect processing capabilities, analytical capabilities, to not only static content, but dynamic content, and create multi-dimensional information that provides a unique information service that ultimately allows us to escape the flatlands. Just like we heard last night, we're looking for the I within data, and that's what escaping the flatlands is all about.